It is a great honor and a privilege to introduce Ludwig Nenkin in your beautiful home here in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem.
Borchlev.
Wonderful. And Ludwig, you were born in Germany.
I was born in Germany in 1926. My mother came from a very famous family, Bondi, from Mainz. Rabbi Shmuel Bondi was her grandfather, and my father came from Galicia, Poland. We lived in Breslau, a town in East Germany, till my father had to leave in 1933 because of Nazi persecution. At that time, I was 7 to 8 years old. He went to Vienna to open a Hebrew bookstore. When the Germans moved in, he moved out. He then went to Czechoslovakia. He did the same, eventually ending up in Switzerland and Zurich, where he acted as a chazan to the community. My mother and my sister and myself stayed in Germany till 1939. My sister left for London in early 1939, brought over by our relations, the family Sassoon, who lived in London. I left London 2 or 3 days before the war, again brought over by the family Sassoon and to London.
Can I just ask, Ludwig, growing up in Germany, in the time that you grew up, do you remember any anti-Semitism when you were growing up?
Of course I remember anti-Semitism.
Do you remember Kristallnacht?
Oh yes, I very much remember Kristallnacht. At that time we were living in a small flat, and we could smell the burning of 2 shuls. One a Reform shul, which was burnt down, and another synagogue. My mother took us out. I don't know why. We went out, and as we walked, we saw part of the Torah, pieces of Torah lying on the street. And having been brought up very religious, I wanted to pick it up. Mom said, "Don't touch it. It's dangerous to do anything." I also remember an incident. I was getting on towards my bar mitzvah, and I was going to shul to be tested whether I'm good enough to lane on Shabbat. And on the way, a man came up to me and he said, "Hello, I'm your uncle." And I said, "I don't speak to strangers." And I walked away. And when I came back from shul, he was sitting on my table. I knew it was my uncle.
Wow.
There was one other incident which comes to mind. I was walking along the street, and a Nazi man came up to me and said, "You lovely little boy." I was a very handsome boy. "Why aren't you in the Nazi youth party?" And I said, "Well, I'm Jewish." "Oh, what a pity."
Sure. And the school you went to, was it a Jewish school?
I went to a Jewish school, yes. I went to a Jewish school.
And did you have only Jewish friends, or did you have German friends as well?
I had Jewish friends. I went to a Jewish school. I had Jewish friends. The only non-Jew I came across was a lady well, two people actually. One lady helped us clean their flat. She was a very nice non-Jewish lady. And then our next door neighbors were Christians and Nazis.
They were Nazis as well.
And we had to be very careful that we didn't make any noise or upset him anyway. My mother was very concerned. My mother was by herself.
Wow. And did you feel the anti-Semitism? Did you actually feel
yes.
it?
We were very, 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 very poor. We literally were starving. Because when my father left, all his business got destroyed. And we were living on food parcels, which the local community used to send us every Shabbat.
Wow. It must have been very difficult when your father left.
It was extremely difficult, very extremely difficult. He never came to my bar mitzvah.
Sure.
At night, after bar mitzvah, my mother and me went to a phone outside town to ring him up. And he spoke to us, wished me mazel tov, obviously crying his eyes out. I was his only son.
But could you understand why he had to leave? You understood why he had to leave?
Oh yes, I knew why he had to leave. We could hear the Nazis marching on the streets and singing their songs and all sorts of things.
Sure. And when your sister left, did you want to go with her, or she could only go by herself?
Well, at that time, the only people who could go were when somebody had to guarantee them money until they became 18. Now, my sister was 2.5 years younger than me, so it was easier to find a guarantor for her than for me, because for me they had to pay a lot longer. The English government insisted that capital is put down on the bank until we reach 18.
Wow.
So somebody had to put down quite a lot of capital. So my sister got there first. An interesting story. My sister tried very, very hard to get me there. And she didn't know how to get money. So she found herself a job in the evenings, stitching buttons on.
Wow.
She thought by having a few extra pennies, she might be able to help me, get me to...
And how old was your sister at this time?
My sister was at the time 15.
15, wow.
And I was 13. Now the friends of Mrs. Selina Sassoon heard about that story. And she was so surprised about it, so excited about it, that she made a party for all her friends. They all contributed some money. And that money went into my account, and I was allowed to go and leave England, leave Germany.
For England.
And arrive in England.
So when they put down the money and you could go, do you remember the day that you left?
Oh yes.
What happened on that day?
Well, it was very unhappy day for me, because I had a grandmother who I had to leave behind.
And your mother?
And my mother. Well, my mother, that's another story I'll come to in a minute. But my grandmother left. I leave my grandmother, who unfortunately was taken to the concentration camp and there died.
Do you know which camp she went to? Do you know which concentration camp they took her to?
She was taken to the one in Czechoslovakia. I forgot the name now.
Theresienstadt? Theresen?
Not Theresienstadt. Theresienstadt. That's right.
And she died there?
She died there together with my aunt, yes. But when I left, I said goodbye to my grandmother, and she put a hand on my head, and she said, "Just be Dati.
Just be religious.
That's all I want from you. Just be Dati." And then my mother took me to the station, and from there I went to Berlin, which was the center of all the Kindertransports. And there I stayed overnight. And from there, we went on a train to London. We stopped on the way on the border of between Germany and Holland. And I was carrying with me a box of stamps. I loved stamps. Every penny I ever owned went to buy stamps. And I had a lovely album of stamps. I realized I couldn't take that album with me, so I took out all the stamps and put it into a box. And I carried the box in my rucksack. And when I got to the border, the Germans moved in to see who we were. And he said to me, "What have you got in that rucksack?" I said, "A box." "Open it." So I took it out and opened it. He took it. He said, "My son also collects stamps. I'll give it to him." I was an innocent little boy, and I said, "But these are my stamps." So he kicked me in the back and my bottom. He said, "And now they are mine." I still remember that, a little thing.
How old were you at this time when you went?
13.
13, just after your bar mitzvah?
A week after my mitzvah.
And Ludwig, when you had to say goodbye to your mother, it must have been so emotional for you.
Terrible. It was very, very emotional for me, but in a funny way, I switched off. I switched off all my emotions. I couldn't take it. I couldn't take the emotion part of it. I switched off. When I got to London, and I was evacuated in a little village called Shefford, and under Rabbi Dr. Schoenfeld. I remember Rabbi Dr. Schoenfeld collecting us in the school hall, in the schoolyard, and saying to us, "We are going to the country. Anybody who is not prepared to listen to me, walk out now. Because I'm telling you, except for challah and meat, you are allowed to eat everything." Quite a few walked out. I had no mother or father, I stayed.
Can I just ask, before you went to the countryside, when you got to Berlin, you went on the train by yourself to Berlin. This is when you're still in Germany. Weren't you very nervous, a little 13-year-old boy going on the train by yourself?
Well, I wasn't by myself. There were maybe 20, 30 children there.
And did you know any of the children?
No.
They weren't friends, you didn't know?
No.
Did you make friends straight away?
No, I don't think I did. I was too upset to speak to anybody.
And do you remember going on the boat from Holland to...
Yes, I remember going on the boat. And when we got the other side, what was it, Harwich? I think we landed. There were maybe 200 of us.
And what date was this? Was this just before the start of the...
That was may have been the 1st of September. I think
you left just before?
Just before. I left on the 28th or something like it. And first, I think the war started on the 3rd of September.
The 1st. And
when we arrived, it was 1st. And the people, the police would not allow us to get down
from the boat
because he said, "You've got 100 permits, you are 200 of yours, 100 can go and 100 have to go back to Germany."
This was the British officials.
And the people in charge of us said, "No way, we are not leaving anyone behind." So the argument started. So nobody was allowed to leave. All we were allowed to do is play football next to the boat, under guard. That went on for about 2 or 3 days, and then the war started. And then after the war started, they couldn't send us back anymore. So I went to London.
And what happened when you got to London?
When I went to London, the Jewish Refugee Committee took me over and sent me somewhere to be billeted to some Jewish family.
Do you remember the family?
Oh yes, I can't remember the name anymore, but I remember the family.
And were they very good to you?
They were all right. They were all right. I was only there a few days, and then we were all sent to the countryside to be evacuated.
Oh, straight away, only after a few weeks?
After a few days.
A few days, wow.
And we were all evacuated, and I still remember being taken into a hall. And we were all sitting down in benches, and the local villagers never seen Jews before, never seen a Jew before. So the government said, well, you can choose whichever children you wanted.
Wow.
So the people came around, looked at us up and down, and said, yes, I'll have him, I'll have him, I'll have him. So we were sent to various families, and I, together with 4 others, were sent to Squire's house. I was very lucky. Unfortunately, one of the people who were with me was a gunner.
Oh, yeah, that's a thief?
And one day when we all went to sleep, he went downstairs. They were very wealthy people. And he took all the silver out of the silver cupboard. When they came home, they realized that silver has been emptied out. So they started off, and they're looking everywhere for it. Put it and they looked for it, looked under his bed, and found a sack of silver. So they threw us all out. We were all out, finished, gone. We were taken to another family, and the other family wouldn't have it either. So we were sent into a family which had for handicapped children. And one of the handicapped child had scarlet fever. I got the scarlet fever, and I was sent to the local hospital. At the local hospital, nobody could speak English, except for one priest.
You mean German? They couldn't speak in German?
German, sorry, I don't think it's German. So he spoke to me in German. He was a very nice man. He wanted to make me Christian. But having been brought up and the Bar Mitzvah and everything else, very orthodox, it wouldn't work.
Wow. And do you remember Rabbi Schoenfeld coming to Sheffield?
Yes, of course. Rabbi Dr. Schoenfeld came to Sheffield very well. I knew Rabbi Dr. Schoenfeld wonderful. He was the one who helped me bring my father to England, because father was living in Switzerland together with my mother.
Your mother managed to go to Switzerland?
My mother went, on the day I went to London, she went to Mainz, where she was born. Bondi, the family of Mainz. You may have heard of Rabbi Bondi, Rabbi Shmuley Bondi, very famous Rav. She wanted to say goodbye to her parents who were buried there. And my father sent a letter, sent a telegram to her saying, take the next train back to Switzerland, and I'll be waiting for you, and I'll take you over the greenest border, illegal border. But there were 2 trains leaving, a fast one and a slow one. And she didn't know which one to take. So she took the slow one, and when she got there, she saw 2 men already waiting for her, said, come with us quickly. So she ran with them quickly in Basel, and went over the border, illegal. She was there a week. When the Swiss governments put up notices saying anybody who into Switzerland illegal, provided their report to the police and is on the way to another country, you can stay for another week. So my mother said, well, what can my mother do? They had nothing. She went to the police. My father was waiting outside. After an hour, he went in there and said, "Where's my wife?" "Ah, she's run away. She's on the train back to Germany."
Oh no.
So my father was a very, very clever man. Said, "But she was only going to be here for a day. She's a nurse and she's going to France." So he said, "Well, anybody can say that." My father said, "But I'll pay you a sum of money. If I don't keep my word, you can keep the money. In Switzerland, money is everything." So he said, "Yes, how much are you prepared to pay?" He said, "I'll put down at that time, I don't know the figure roughly, 2,000 or 3,000 pounds. "Okay, where's the money?" My father said, "Do you think I walk about with 3,000 pounds in my pocket? This afternoon I'll come back to you with 3,000 pounds, but how do I know my wife will not be going back to Germany in the meantime?" She said, "All right, I'll promise you. I'll take her off the train, but you come back in the afternoon and give me the money." They pulled my mother off the train, put her to prison. My father came back in the afternoon, and the officer said, "Well, where's the money?" Yeah, he gave him money. "But that's not 5,000 pounds, that's 500 pounds. I couldn't get any more. By that time, she had already left the train.
God.
The public opinion in Switzerland was very much against Jews being shipped to the concentration camps. So she managed to stay in Switzerland. She was saved.
And did she have to stay a long time in the prison, or did they release her?
No, they believed her and she was taken out of prison. But she had to report twice a day to the police.
And where were they staying in Switzerland? In which town or city were they?
Zurich.
In Zurich. But twice a day she had to report. Twice a day she had to report to the police.
Twice a day, yes, twice a day. That went on. She was a refugee. And then they stayed there for the whole of the war. And after the war, we had great difficulty in bringing them to England. And Rabbi Dr. Schoenfeld came up with an idea. He made my father the headmaster of the Adassisroel Cheder. There was no Cheder in the Adassisroel, but officially we got a letter. "We herewith urgently need you as headmaster for the Adassisroel synagogue." With that letter and that report, England gave him a permit to come to England.
And your mother would come as well?
My mother came as well. Unfortunately, 3 weeks afterwards, he died in London.
He died in London. But you saw him? You saw him?
I saw him.
And was this the first time? In how many years hadn't you seen your father?
6 or 7, something like that.
It must have been so emotional when you actually saw your father when he came to London.
It was. Not only that, I found it very, very hard to appreciate when my father was lying on the bed dead. I couldn't, I've never come across death before. I was born by that time. So I never saw death before of my father. And to this day I can still see I can see the picture lying, my father dead on the bed after all these years when I didn't see him.
And how did he pass away? How did he die?
Heart attack. At that time, angina, he had angina. At that time you couldn't do anything with angina. There was no cure for angina.
Oh, Ludwig, you had it hard. You had it very hard. During the time when you were in the countryside, where was your sister?
My sister was in England.
But did you manage to see her? Was she also in the countryside?
My sister and me were very, very close. Very, very close.
Was she also evacuated to Sheffield?
Yes, she was. In fact, when I arrived in Sheffield, I went to Sheffield consists of a little village with one street. The non-Jews never seen a Jew before there. They were looking for us for our tails. They made us bend down to look for our tails.
What do you say? Wow.
So I was walking along the street looking for my sister. Eventually somebody shouted from the other side, "Lutz, Lutz," my first name is Lutz, "Lutz," and there she was. My sister was very, very good to me. She died a few years ago now. She was older than I am.
And when you saw her, you must have been so happy to see her.
Happy is not the word. And then I stayed on in Sheffield in school, and after about 2 or 3 years, I got impatient. I wanted a different school. I was very technically minded.
And let me ask, you stayed in the handicapped place, and then where did you go when you were in Sheffield? Where were you living when you were in
the
Sheffield?
handicapped chairs until I went to hospital. I went to hospital.
And then after hospital?
Afterwards, they took me back, and I was staying in the little house which Dr. Schoenfeld had a house there where the children were taught downstairs. Upstairs were some bedrooms where we slept.
And Dr. Schoenfeld organized it?
Oh, yeah. Dr. Schoenfeld organized it, and Dr. Wagner was, not Dr. Wagner, Mr. Wagner was one of the teachers there.
And did you ever see Mrs. Grunfeld?
Of course, Dr. Judith Grunfeld, yeah. Of course.
Did she come and visit you?
Well, I visited the school all the time, of course. She was a headmistress. How do you know Dr. Judith?
And you remember her? I know her granddaughter. Sure, she lives here in Jerusalem.
That's it.
And you had a good connection with Dr. Grunfeld?
Yes, very good. She said to me, I was a very lazy boy, didn't want to work. I wasn't interested in anything, only play. And she said, why don't you learn something, do something? I wasn't interested in anything. So she had to go at me once or twice to tell me I must behave myself more better. See, we were staying in that house, and the situation was that it was a schoolhouse where 6 or 7 of us slept upstairs. At 6 in the evenings, everybody went home, and 6 of us were left by ourselves. We went wild.
And during in the school, you learned they had Limudei Kodesh. You could learn religious, Jewish religious subjects as well.
We learned Kodesh. I learned Gemara. The headmaster was a man called Dr. Spitzer. His children, I think, live in Israel.
Wow.
And during the day, we learned arithmetic and this and that, you know.
And during this time, did you get any correspondence from your parents? Could you write letters to each other?
But once every 3 or 6 months, they used to be able to write me a few words through the Red Cross. It's censored, of course. The letter was censored, but the Red Cross to say, we are well, we are well, we are healthy. We couldn't phone them, but we got some letters from them.
And where was your sister? Was she in a school nearby you?
She was in the same school, yeah. The Dr. Schoenfeld it was a mixed school, boys and girls.
And where was she staying, your sister, during this time?
She was with me all the time.
But she wasn't in the same house?
No. She was billeted out, what they call billeted non-Jewish people.
And were they good to your sister, the non-Jewish people?
Oh yes, they got very well. She was a lovely, lovely, lovely lady.
Did you ever go there for meals, or when you go visit her?
Well, no, meals, we couldn't have meals because it was organized that once a day we had kosher meals in the schoolhouse. The rest of the time we used to get a piece of bread to eat, And my sister used to get a piece of bread where she was living.
And how long did you stay in Sheffield? When the war ended, were you still...
Well, I stayed in Sheffield, I would say, maybe 3 years. And then I went to a local school, technical school, near there. I used to carry on living in Sheffield, but I went every day to school in the morning to learn technical things. And that's how I became eventually an engineer. I'm a professional engineer. And today, and before I left, when I was working 40 years in London. I was head of the senior partner of a very, very large consulting engineers. We built maybe 2,000 or 3,000 buildings in London.
Wow.
I had about 150 to 200 people working for me. Before I retired 25 years ago, I'm now 95, and I retired when I was 65, about 30 years ago.
Sure. And okay, Ludwig, this is just unbelievable. Can I just ask, when the war ended, do you remember the day that the war ended, where they said it's D-Day and the war has ended? Do you remember those days when the war...
Yes, I was in London, and I was going to college to study for my degree. Wait a minute. What happened there was that I was studying for a year, and I can't remember quite, but I was studying for a year or two, and then I ran out of money. So Dr. Sherford gave me a job in the school to teach. I teach mathematics, chemistry and physics.
Where was this? In his school in London?
In London, yes.
What was the school, the name of the school?
Jewish secondary school.
Wow, and you taught in his school?
And in the evenings, I went 4 times a week, every day, to college to study for my degree.
Wow.
I never came home till 10 hours. I got married by that time, and I came home at 10 o'clock at night.
Okay, and I just want to backtrack a little bit. Your mother had already come to England?
Oh yes.
And where was your mother staying when she came?
My mother stayed with my sister. When my father died, my mother stayed from my sister all the time.
And where was your sister staying now?
Well, she got married, and she got married to Dr. Herman, Rabbi Dr. Herman. Rabbi Dr. Herman, my mother had 2 children. She had my sister and me. My sister had a daughter. She had many daughters, but she had one daughter called Judy Cooper, whose husband is a dentist, or was a dentist, Dr. Cooper. That's when I came to your surgery. I said, I've had my dentist retired. That's why I was very pleased you could take me over.
And was your sister living in which part of England? In London?
Well, my father-in-law, my brother-in-law was a rabbi, and he moved from place to place. He was living first in Harrow, London, and then he went to Liverpool. Then he went to, I don't know if also Glasgow.
Gee.
And then he went to Leeds. Then he ended up in London again. Rabbis move about.
And when your mom came with your father, where did they go straight away? When your parents came to England, did they go?
They stayed with my sister.
And was she now living in London? This was before she was married?
In London, yes.
Was she in Stamford Hill? Was she living in Stamford Hill?
No, she was living in Harrow, because he had a job in Harrow on the Hill. He was the rabbi of the synagogue in Harrow.
And how old was your sister when she got married?
23, 24, something like that, I suppose.
It must have been a very emotional also wedding.
Yes. Well, at that time, we couldn't do much weddings. Everybody was very poor. You know.
But your father, he had already passed away when your sister got married.
No, he managed to be for the wedding.
Your father was there for the wedding, really?
He came to Switzerland. He came for 1 week to the wedding and went back again.
Wow.
Well, her wedding was after the war was finished. We couldn't get him out of Switzerland to England. It took nearly a year until Dr. Schoenfeld managed to get him out into England.
But your parents were there at the wedding of your sister?
Yeah. I knew Rabbi Dr. Schoenfeld practically like my father. I remember I used to go every Friday night. I went to his house for a share with him. He used to live in London, in Stamford Hill. And he used to go a share every Friday night, especially in the winter. We used to go there. He was a fantastic man. I remember when I finished my degree, he rang me up and he said, Ludwig, you finished your degree? I said, yes. I hear you passed? I said, yes. Tomorrow morning I expect you to be in school again, starting teaching. I said, no, Dr. Schoenfeld. I'm sorry, I can't. I can't afford to live on what you're paying. I've got to go into industry.
Wow.
You wouldn't believe it. No, we need you. You're a wonderful teacher. I said, sorry, I can't.
But you kept a close connection with Rabbi Schoenfeld. You kept a close connection with him.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Whenever we had a problem, we used to... Oh, yes, Dr. Schoenfeld was a fantastic man. Later on, he became very ill.
Yeah.
He had cancer on the brain or something. And he had very well. I used to daven in the shul, which is part of North Hendon Shul in London, which is part of Dr. Schoenfeld's, next door to Schoenfeld's school, the Hasmonean school. And there I built them a synagogue, because by that time I was already a consulting engineer. So I built the North Hendon synagogue for them.
You helped build the North Hendon synagogue. You were instrumental in building the North
Hendon Shul, yes. I did a lot of shuls. I did about 6 shuls in London.
Which other shuls did you build?
We built North Hendon. We built the Bayswater Shul, United Synagogue. We did the headquarters of Jews College in the West End. I can't remember anymore now. One or two others, I can't remember.
And Ludwig, can I ask, did you remember, or did you ever meet Rabbi Hertz? Rabbi Hertz, did you remember Rabbi Hertz?
Hurst?
Hertz, Rabbi Schoenfeld's father-in-law, the
No.
chief Rabbi Hertz.
No. I don't remember his father at all. I don't think I think he died before I got there. You remember him?
No, he passed away a long time ago. It is,
Oh, yes.
but we had his chumash, and he was a very, very special.
And my uncle wrote the books, Dr. Eli Munk.
Dr. Eli Munk was your uncle?
Yeah.
Really?
He's married to a sister of my mother.
Dr. Eli Munk. So his daughter married Rabbi Jacobowitz.
That's right. I knew Rabbi
And
Jacobowitz.
that's your mishpacha.
Very distant, Rabbi Jacobowitz, very distant, yeah. Of course, I knew Rabbi Jacobowitz very well. Oh, he was a fantastic man, Rabbi Jacobowitz. His righteousness, fantastic.
Wow.
Fantastic.
So Rabbi Eli Munk with his daughter were in Geneva, also in the refugee camp in Geneva.
Rabbi Eli Munk was staying with my parents in Zurich because they ran away from France, and for a few months they didn't know what to do. During the war, he stayed with my parents in Zurich.
Really, Dr. Rabbi Eli Munk?
I don't know how long, I don't know what, but yes, Rabbi Eli Munk, of course, because he was mishpacha. I met him again in London later on. He wrote that wonderful book on the what you call on the Siddur, translation of the Siddur. You got it, have you?
Sure, everybody, but wow. But when he came to Switzerland, he first came to Geneva. They were in a refugee camp in Geneva. And it was very difficult. He was there also with, they were in a main refugee camp and they didn't have kosher food. They suffered a lot.
You mean Rabbi Munk?
Rabbi Eli Munk with his daughter, when they came to Switzerland, they had it very difficult in the beginning.
That's why they spent, I don't know how long, maybe a month or 2 months or 6 months, I'm not sure. It was our parents. My parents were only living in 1 room or 2 rooms. I don't know how you managed it. They were my father, used to teach children bar mitzvah. And the Swiss people were very hard people. He used to go up 6 stairs, and the mother used to open the door and said, "The boy doesn't feel well, come back another time." Now, my father was as hard to go all the way down.
And that's how you try to make a living?
No, he was a Balkauer, and he was Balkauer not in the main shul. And they had they had a main shul and they had a Bet HaMedrash. And he was laning in the Bet HaMedrash.
Was this in Zurich?
And yes, he was a wonderful Balkauer, and that's how he made a bit of a living as well.
And Ludwig, can I ask you, did you know or hear of Miriam Falk? Miriam Falk, she was actually with Rabbi Munk, Eli Munk, and his daughter in Geneva. So she lives here in Yerushalayim, and Rabbi Munk helped her when they were in France before they went to Switzerland.
No, I don't know.
Rabbi Eli Munk was an amazing person. He helped a lot of Jewish children during the war.
His father was amazing. When I told you that story about meeting that man on the street, that was Rabbi Munk's father.
That was Rabbi
my
Munk's
uncle.
Oh, wow. What an amazing story. Sure.
He came for bar mitzvah. I said, I have to come to you bar mitzvah. And he came during the war with the Nazis in the trains. He came to be with me on Shabbos for the bar mitzvah. Because he said, your father's not there, you're on your own. I've got to be with you. He came all the way from, I think he was living near Munich. He was a Rav near Munich, I think.
And I have to ask you, did you lay in your bar mitzvah?
Sure. Lane and Haftarah, everything.
Your mother must have been very proud of you.
Well, so, yeah. Very hard times. We went for a Kiddush to my grandmother because she couldn't walk, so we had to make a Kiddush. We had lots of people come for the Kiddush.
Wow, it's just, what an amazing story. And all the years you kept a close connection with your sister.
Yeah.
And your mother, what did she do when your mother came to England? What did your mother do?
Nothing. She was an old lady.
But she stayed with your sister?
Yeah.
And you were very close with your mother as well, I'm sure.
Of course. Eventually my mother ended up in an old age home. Eventually. And there she died. She was 100 when she died.
100? Canada? Wow, that's amazing.
100 years old.
And let me ask, Ludwig, what happened to the rest of your family in Germany? Did you have your uncles and aunts?
Well, all my aunts and uncles from my mother's side. My father was a single person. He had no brothers and sisters. Well, he had a brother who died when he was very young. So he was on his own. His parents died, of course. My mother had a lot of aunts and uncles. All ended up in the concentration camp. Killed everyone. Everyone. My mother even showed me letters from her brothers saying, please help me. If you send me money, I might be able to get out. But she had no money. I had no money, she had no money, we had no money. You see, I came to England with the trousers on. That's all. As a young boy, I had nothing. Baruch Hashem. England was very good to me.
Did you ever start collecting the stamps again when you got to England? Did you take up the hobby again of collecting stamps when you came to England?
Never again. Never again. I never want to see a stamp anymore. I was so upset. He hit me and I started complaining. And the leader said, "Stop complaining. Shut up." Because he was afraid. Nazi took his box and walked out. And gave me, with his heavy boots, he gave me into my bottom. He hit me, kicked me. I still remember the pain. It's quite painful.
And you were only 13. You were only 13 years old.
I was 13.
13 years old. Wow.
But thank God, I made a career for myself in England. I was one extremely well-known engineer in London. And that's one interesting, I must tell you. I was doing very well. Are you finished?
Sure, it's wonderful.
I was doing very well as an engineer, and I was in touch with a lot of the most important people in the developing world. One of them was the managing director of P&O. You may have heard of P&O. One of the biggest shipping and development companies. And he always used to give me all the big jobs. When I say big jobs, we're talking of vast jobs. And we were at a Christmas party. And I was standing by. I didn't want to go near him. I didn't want to bother him. And the people were crowding out him, And one man said to him, "Why do you give Nelkin, as he's called, all the work? He's not the best engineer in London. There's good engineers. Why don't you give it to him? He's not a bad engineer, but there are other good engineers." He said, "Because he is the most honest person I know." He said he's an Orthodox Jew and he's honest 100%. That's why I give him the work. I heard it, but he didn't know I heard it.
And was he Jewish himself?
No,
Not Jewish.
nothing but Jewish. He comes from a top class. Basil Winham was his name. Basil Winham was well known in the development world.
Wow.
He got an MBE or something as well on top of it. No.
And when you were starting work and you were married already, did you still have a connection with Rabbi Schoenfeld? Did you used to go?
Yes, always have. I used to see him very often in the park. He used to shout, "Lutz, come here, talk to me, sit next to me on the bench."
He was very iconic. He was a tremendous Jewish hero.
Oh, he was a tremendous person.
Rabbi Schoenfeld saved over 3,000 children, over 3,000 Yidden.
He took people from the street. And put them in his car and moved them to England. I knew somebody who was there at the meeting. When the United Synagogue had a meeting, Dr. Schempo was there, and the United Synagogue said, "Well, we don't know what to do." Dr. Schempo said, "Nothing you can do. I'm just going there, I'm bringing you 100 people there. What are you going to do with them? They can't go back." What he did? He literally paid people to get them from England to England, from Poland to England.
To save a Jewish soul. That's what he did.
And they loved him. He was a wonderful man. Unfortunately, in the end, he made a lot of problems for everybody because he wasn't mentally well.
It was difficult because he'd achieved so much in his life, and
he achieved so much in his life.
And he actually saved so many people, and against tremendous adversity. There were many people that were against him.
Oh, United States. They were real English people. We can't do anything against the law. What's the law, he said? There's people at stake, there's lives at stake.
He acted independently. He was
Independently, nothing to do with anybody else.
and there's so many people, so many families today, thanks to him for having.
He brought the people into his office. There you are, there, he said. What are you going to do with them?
Look how he brought your father. He created a position that wasn't there, but he brought him. And let me ask, with regard to Germany, did you ever, after the war, have you ever gone back to visit Germany or your hometown?
No, never went back to my hometown. I went to Germany. I had to go to Germany on my business for a couple of days.
Was it difficult going back to Germany?
I hated it. I hated every minute of it. Funny enough, when I went to the bathroom, I couldn't use the soap.
Because of what was...
It's stupid. It's stupid. And soap is soap. But you know what happened with the soap?
With the bodies.
No, I got out as fast as I could. I should have gone there for a week. I didn't. I only went for 2 days.
And did you speak German at home or?
Yes, German. My mother was a Jacke. Bondi. Germany, South Mainz. You can't get more Jackies than that. Mr. Soon was a second cousin of my mother. Or first cousin, I think, first cousin of my mother. I used to learn with Rabbi. Have you heard of Rabbi Sassoon? He was my Rav for many years. I used to have shurim with him 3 times a week. He used to live in Letchbos, which was a town not far from. You heard of Letchbos, eh? I used to go from a village, Shefford, which was near Letchbos. I used to go 3 times a week on my bicycle to have a shir with him. Wonderful man, Rabbi Sassoon, fantastic man. And he died very early.
Were you associated with Munchel in Golders Green?
Yeah, I wasn't in touch with Munchel because he was a distant relation of mine because all the monks are related. Yeah. But I didn't go to Munchel. I didn't live nearly. I lived in Hendon, I lived in Golders Green. My niece is a member of the shul now.
And when did you decide to come to Israel?
Well, my daughter moved here first. And then after a while, we decided to follow her.
And you were happy when you came?
10 years ago. Yes and no. It wasn't easy. I don't speak Hebrew, very little Hebrew. I find it hard here. Really, you've got to have a little money here. Without money, you're absolutely lost here.
It's not easy, it's not easy.
It's very, very hard.
But it's hard in England as well, it's not...
Well, I was very successful in England, so I couldn't say. But I came here as a retired person. Thank God I've got a pension, that's why I live on a pension here. And I'm pleased I came because I'm able here to help my grandchildren a lot. All my grandchildren, most of them are learning in yeshiva or are involved in yeshiva work. None of them earn a lot of money. I have a hard struggle. I'm able to help them.
Wonderful.
I live in Ramat and in Sanhedria. They're very Haredi. I'm the only one who's not Haredi.
Sure. Wow. And Ludwig, can I ask, what advice would you give? You know, you've gone through so much in your life. You've seen so much, and you've had such an unbelievable experience going through. But what advice would you give your grandchildren or the next generation from everything that you've been through?
Well, number one, I wouldn't give advice because I don't think they'll listen to it.
We'll all listen to you.
That's first thing. But if I was going to give advice, I would say the first thing you got to do is you got to run your life on honest, decent lines. You got to be a mensch before anything else. For the Torah, be a mensch. You can't keep the Torah without being a mensch. I don't believe in being a ganef and going to shul at the same time. It doesn't work. Then I have been brought up in Torah der Eretz. So I would say to them, which they won't listen to, by all means learn, but you've got to make a living as well. Have a profession, must make a living. Make a panos as well. Don't expect to learn and keep your hands open. The Torah says quite clearly, you got to have a job, you got to work, which I won't listen to. It's a different world today. That's why I said I won't give advice, because I know they wouldn't listen to it.
But I just want to ask, you must be very grateful to many people that, like Rabbi Schoenfeld, and you're grateful to England. England was good to you.
Wonderful. England gave me whatever I had. England allowed me to become a prominent engineer in London. How else would I have got somewhere? I found very little anti-Jewish feelings in London. There were some. Occasionally we came across upper stratus of where there was anti-Jewish feelings, but very, very little of it. The English are a very fair nation.
And they took you in with the Kindertransport.
They took me in with nothing but trousers. I had no money, nothing.
And did you ever used to go to reunions with other children from the Kindertransport? Did you keep contact with any of the other children from the Kindertransport?
No. I kept once when I was out of a job, when I had a bit of a problem. I went to see the refugee committee, and they found me some sort of a position. It was a technical school called Ort, where I was teaching engineering in Ort for a very short period of time. Because see, until I got my degree, I needed work. I had to work. Today people go to university and they study, and that's it and finished. They get paid for studying. I didn't get paid for anything. I had to make a living. I had a wife and a child to keep. Now I hadn't finished my degree yet. You might say, why did you marry so early? Well, I had no family. I wanted a home.
And your mother and your sister were at your wedding?
Oh yeah. Sure. The mother and sister were very close to us. So I say, thank God I've done well, Baruch Hashem.
It's wonderful.
I'm not sure whether you need my story.
It's unbelievable. I just want to thank you. I'm just going to come in. But Ludwig, your story is just unbelievable, and you are. It really, really is. It's an amazing, amazing story. Not only a story, it's your life. It's
my life, yes. My life story.
So I'm just going to sit over here.
Well, it's very kind of you, and I hope I haven't wasted completely your time. I'm not
Ludwig, I just want to mention, first of all, it's the greatest honor and a privilege to hear your story, to have you as a patient. And
thank you very much for
you are so inspiring, and look what you did and what you've achieved, and it's just been the greatest honor and privilege to be with you today, and for you to recall your life's journey, and I'm extremely grateful. And Ad Mei V'Esrim plus VAT, you should live and only have mazel bracha and nachas from your grandchildren, and in good health and in happiness and all of Hashem's blessings.
Thank you very much for taking the trouble of listening to me.
It's been the greatest pleasure. It really has. And I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Would you like to finish your drink?
And look, I just have to ask you the last question. What is your Hebrew name?
Baruch Lev.
Baruch Lev. Wow. But you went with your English name, with your German name, really.
Ludwig Bertram Nelken. But my Hebrew name is Baruch Lev Ben Shmuel.
Well, thank you so
Baruch Lev
much.
Ben Shmuel.
Thank you so much, and I'm extremely grateful to you.
Thank you.